Excellent. Well, I reckon we get this kicked off. Hey, everyone. My name is Oliver Bruce. I am the co-host of the Micromobility podcast and conference that we run around the world, working here with Micromobility Industries. I am incredibly excited about today's panel on the future of commuting. So we have an amazing panel with us today. I'll give them a chance in a second to introduce themselves, but I do also just want, as a small bit of housekeeping, what we're going to do is we're going to talk for about 40 minutes or so between the four of us, and then we're going to go into questions and answers. And so if anybody has any questions, by all means, please drop them into the Q&A. You can see that down there on the bottom of the screen, or put it into the chat and we'll be able to keep track of those as well. I do also want to call out Luke, who's our wonderful team member here at Micromobility Industries, who's calling in from California. It's 1 a.m. over there. So I'm going to say thank you very much, Luke, for helping us get set up. You can go to bed now. But with that, I would love to give an opportunity to have Giancarlo maybe kick off and introduce yourself, and then move on to David, Richard, and then Shirley.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. Good morning, everybody. Just a few slides to introduce myself and my company. I'm Giancarlo Oranges, and I'm General Manager at VAIMOO. Actually, I joined VAIMOO a few months ago. My background has been developed in the mobility environment, particularly in the mopeds and scooters environment, as I've been working in Piaggio, Peugeot motorcycle, and the last experience was in Ascoleva, provider of a scooter sharing system for Mimoto, Incultra, and some others. In VAIMOO, what we are supposed to do, what is our business proposition and value proposition? We invest to build and provide, as we can read it together, full e-bike sharing mobility experience, offering scalable solution to any transportation leader. That means that we are on the market with turnkey solution, including from consumer app to desktop management, passing through bicycles, recharging, parking, and infrastructure, and everything operators needs to exploit a successful sharing solution experience to their customers and their clients. Where we are operating now, at the moment, we are present in different cities such as Copenhagen, just 1 second, Rotterdam, Cambridge, Peterborough, and Kettering, and we are cooperating with some of our presence in this panel, and we are ready to expand our cooperation and our positioning on the market. We are an Italian company, as Oliver said. So that's all at the moment, and I give you back the video and the screen.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Giancarlo. David.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. First, thanks for the invites. David Corral, I'm the director of the partnership team for FreeNow, so in charge of working with all the partners we want to onboard and integrate on our platform. FreeNow is a joint venture of BMW and Daimler. Started as a ride-hailer under the brand MyTaxi initially, then acquired some other companies like Hilo, be it Clever Taxi and Captain. And in 2019, MyTaxi was rebranded as FreeNow. In 2020, all the other brands were also under the flagship FreeNow, and the entire company is moving towards the creation of a multi-mobility platform. And we started last year, especially in Germany, with partners like Voi, Miles, and Emmy in Germany. And this year, we also signed a cooperation agreement and started operations with Tier and Cultra, and expanded to new markets in Europe mostly. So we're now active as a multi-mobile platform in France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, and Italy, and a few more countries to come soon, and a few more partners to come soon. And really happy to be part of the conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Lovely to have you here. Richard.
Hi, Oliver. Hi, everybody. Good to meet you all. So I'm Richard Corbett, the Regional General Manager for Voi in the UK, Ireland, and Benelux. Worked with the business for a year now since the UK government legalised e-scooters. So I've been working at Voi to really grow that business, and we're now the largest operator in the UK, occupying 60% market share, live in 18 cities. So we're an e-scooter, shared e-scooter rental company. So you can download the app, find our scooters in actually over 50 cities across Europe. And you can unlock the scooter if you haven't done it before with your phone, and you get charged per minute, or you can get a monthly pass for something like 40 euros a month, where you can have unlimited travel. So that's our core business, and more recently we've gone into e-bikes, working with Giancarlo and his team, which has been hugely successful across the 3 cities. So now we're multimodal and continuing to do so, creating new vehicles all the time to really encompass this solution that can help people have a compelling alternative to traveling by car. You know, our mission is to get people out of cars and using green forms of transport, reducing their carbon footprint and making cities better for living. So that's us.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Rich. Looking forward to digging in as well. I've always been very vocal on the sustainability discussion, I think, with e-scooters. So really looking forward to being able to talk a bit about that too. Finally, last but definitely not least, Shirley.
So hi everyone, my name is Shirley and I'm the COO of GoTo Global. I come from the mobility world. I've been in this world for over 10 years. Prior to GoTo, I was at BlaBlaCar and launching a taxi hailing app. And I've been at GoTo for 4 years already, actually taking GoTo Global. Originally, we're an Israeli company, but over the last few years, we expanded. We became fully multimodal. The first and only multimodal company that actually does everything in-house. So everything we do is by GoTo, from the marketing to the operations to the technology. When a user goes and books a vehicle, he books a GoTo vehicle. So we have shared mopeds, shared cars, shared bikes, and shared kick scooters. We have over 5,000 vehicles, 4 million rides on the platform, and we're present in Spain, in Malta, and Israel, and growing to the next markets very soon. And what we offer the user is really a mobility solution for all of their needs, because users have different needs at different moments, and they need different vehicles for that. And we give them that simplicity that from one single app, they can book any of our vehicles with one single billing, with one single payment, everything from GoTo. So this is about us.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Shirley. And just to confirm as well, and maybe you said it and I missed it, but where are you operating? So you said you started in Israel, but you're now operating elsewhere as well?
Yeah, we're in Spain and we're in Malta as well. Spain, we just launched Spain actually a month ago. So we have the biggest, most diverse fleet. We have about 1,200 assets there, from cars, from mopeds, free floating round trip. So it's a very exciting milestone.
Yeah, marvelous. Thank you. Awesome. Well, look, I'm so excited. It's quite an amazing panel, and I'm really looking forward to digging in. But what I really want to start off with a bit is kind of we've all talked about multimodality. Micromobility is my game, so multimodality. And I'm very curious as to, you know, I want to define that term when we talk about mobility as a service and kind of how to tile those things together. Where does it start and where does it end? And I'd love to sort of, if we go Shirley, then we can go to Giancarlo, Richard, and then David. I'd love for you to start and just say what you think it is and what you think it isn't.
Sure. So I think at the end of the day, all of us here in this panel and other companies, we are all mobility as a service, because really the focus is on moving people from private car ownerships that are cluttering the streets of the cities and making noise into consuming the car, the moped, the bike, or the kick scooter as a service. So it's really that shift. So I think a lot of things fall into it. Okay, it can be everything from ride hailing and carpooling into shared vehicles. And so this is my definition, is really moving away from the ownership and the consumption to using mobility as a service, because as I mentioned before, a user has different needs, and for the different needs, they need different things. So sometimes they need to walk, sometimes they need public transportation, sometimes they need a shared car, a shared moped, a shared kick scooter, which is what we provide, but sometimes they want a taxi, okay, because they don't want to be looking for parking. So it's really about the move from ownership to using mobility as a service with all the variety of solutions.
Excellent. Giancarlo?
Oh, I perfectly agree with what Shirley said. I just would like to add that most of the time, user would need more kinds of vehicles at the same time. So maybe they need a bicycle to go from home to station, then a train, then an underground connection, and then it's one moped to go from the underground station to the office, and so on. And mobility as a service means, in my opinion, to offer a full service for this kind of needs, going from the booking up to the drop down of and payment of the vehicles. In a concept of one-stop shop, I have to offer my customer the possibility to choose all their transportation ways in just in one application, and to pay once for every kind of vehicles they want to use, and to have the possibility to choose the time, the vehicles, the way to use it, dropping or being transported for someone else, like in a taxi example. So I think we have to go beyond the vehicles, the multimodal approach with the base for mobility as a service, and integrate this with a platform that manage booking, payments, and every kind of service connected to.
Excellent. Richard, anything you'd add?
Always hard to be the third one with such a great panel.
Yeah, I know. I realize it's getting harder for you guys.
It's that moment you're trying to figure out where's the gap, what have they not mentioned, but they mentioned everything. But I just to reiterate, I mean, it's about reversing the dependency on cars, of course.
Please keep always the same order.
Please don't. It's about reversing the dependency on private cars, and obviously it's a single platform for different shared mobility modes, you know, getting traction together to find an alternative to car ownership and car use. And I would just add that it's all about collaboration and working together. Gone are the days where it's about, you know, fiercely competing with other forms of transport. That's when you start to lose. What you have to do is say, I'm part of a wider transport mix. I'm not, and to Shirley's point, I'm not going to be the solution to everyone's transport needs. Let's say if I'm an e-scooter operator, no one's going to use an e-scooter if they're going to take their kids to school. They can't bring the kid on the scooter, or they can't carry bags if they're going shopping. So we need to work with other forms of transport. We need to know what is our place in that ecosystem. So collaboration is super, super important. Just wanted to underline that. And the second point is it is all dependent on the support from the authority and the city. Without that, it just doesn't function. So that's either space allocation, where do these vehicles, where do these assets go? It's about infrastructure, you know, where do these people ride? Is it safe? Are the roads too fast? Are they narrow? Are there, you know, segregated micromobility lanes to give people that feeling of safety and comfort? So just wanted to underpin, it's about working together and collaboration and support with cities.
Excellent. You did well for someone who came third. And now, David, I'm going to pass it to you, knowing that you're the lucky last.
Yeah, it's even harder to be the last one, right? Like third is difficult, but fourth is even more complicated. So I can only echo what was mentioned already, like the one-stop shop, but also like echo as well, like what Rich highlighted, and the need, like to understand the needs and to support the cities with their mobility targets and help reducing congestion. They will have like sustainability targets, and that's what also one of the aspects the Maas platforms can contribute to. And I can only agree also like with Richard, like you need like a collaboration with the operators, because like you can't have a solution for everything, and you need to collaborate with all the operators and the cities and the public transport as well. And connection to public transport is also an aspect which will become critical in the coming months to have a relevant Maas platform, I believe.
Totally. So this actually, I know that we had this further down for the panelists who may have seen the questions that we put forward to you, but I'm actually going to go straight there, which is because I agree with you, and yet we haven't really talked that much about public transport. Like, yes, it's sort of mentioned in this, right? But in some ways we run vehicle solutions that we think are like the mesh, the part that might connect us in for public transport, and I think that that's really interesting. But where do we think there will be room in the market for the transit agencies who traditionally have done and been responsible for public transport or services that are in this space versus aggregators, third-party people who want to build their own mass products? How is that? Because that's one of the things as I watch this space, especially micromobility, get developed. It's one that I can see that the future is multimodal. I can see that that's where we're going, and yet there seems to be a bit of a mismatch there between where the transit agencies go and where the funding goes for them, and at the same time being able to provide kilometers that might be publicly useful, but maybe don't receive the funding in that space as well. And maybe what I'll do as well is just I'll keep this one a little bit tighter. I'll go David, Rich, and then Shirley on this one here.
Okay, so I think like there's room for everyone, obviously, like in a mass platform world. Obviously, like public transport agencies and the public mass is the type of actors that are really, really important now. But I also believe like private mass like can bring some other aspects, like in terms of UX, in terms of collaboration with all the operators, and in terms of scope as well, because sometimes like the public mass are very local, like they're targeting one city, a couple of cities. There are no real standards like to extend that to a wider range of cities or countries. And that's what the private mass operators like FreeNow can do, actually, like with a presence in several countries and connections with several operators. And I think that's a market that can be shared between public mass and private mass, actually.
Marvelous.
Shall I jump in?
Yeah, go for it, Richard.
So I think that the last year has been it's quite a non-standard year by all accounts. And I think what we've noticed from our side is that a lot of the public transport operators where we operate have been hit really hard in terms of rider numbers. And so, you know, in extreme cases like the Transport for London, they're requiring bailouts by the government, huge multi-million, multi-billion dollar bailouts. And so what we are seeing is certainly a greater appetite from the public transport operators to collaborate. And so, you know, we're the exclusive operator in 18 cities in the UK, and that's probably my best kind of area to comment on. But and I can't comment on the rest of Europe, but certainly in the UK cities we operate in, we have been approached by the public transport operators, the bus companies, the tram companies, etc., because they're looking at ways to get more riders back onto public transport, because a lot of people have lost that trust, particularly with the fear of you know, contracting the virus. And so so as we start to get out of these lockdown and pandemic kind of environments, they're keen to say, okay, well, let's rethink how cities travel and our role in the wider transport mix. And I think there's a great appetite to collaborate. So we have right now 30 different mass and public transport partnerships across Europe, and that's growing at a rapid rate. So we're really seeing these companies say, hey, how do we get someone on the same travel pass, you know, riding on the bus for that long distance and then that last mile, truly using the scooters. And so we're keen to do that as well. And so we look at our service design. How can we enhance the service design to make that a reality and ensure that someone can always use a scooter when leaving the public transport hub? But certainly we're seeing that the tides are changing, and this is a really exciting time to see new ideas come to life.
Excellent. Thanks, Rich. Shirley.
So I agree with Rich. COVID has changed a lot of things, and actually an article we published last year, we said that after COVID, our type of solutions tend to gain from it, because actually you're not traveling with other people in the car or in the moped or in the bike or whatnot. And we said that there'll be a growth of at least 120% in those type of services. And it actually happened. Like the best month of the company's history was in August of last year. After COVID, you know, same store compared to the year before, more and more people used GoTo to actually move around, because they were afraid to use, let's say, public transport or carpooling or all of these different types. So I think, first of all, there is a great opportunity now, and more people started using the service. The other thing is, I think, as also David said, public transportation is important. It's part of our day-to-day lives, you know, and And there is also a mode of transport for different people, because not everybody can afford a taxi every day to go to work, or a shared car. And sometimes you're using the metro, but the thing is that a lot of times the metros and all of them, they are a bit packed at some different hours. And if you'd like to have a bit more space, then solutions like GoTo or everyone else here are good solutions. I think the last thing is that when we look at cities in Europe, they are quite, walkable and bikeable and so on, and governments are paving roads for more bikes and stuff like that, for example, in Berlin. But still you have 30 to 50% of people using their car. So the market is still so big and there is space for everyone. And in shared mobility, we're only like maybe at 5% usage, of all the potential. So there is so much room to grow for everyone, including the public transit agencies. But as everybody said, we do need government support, whether it's permits, whether it's specific parking for shared cars, specific parking for the kick scooters and for the bikes and the mopeds. And so this is government relations is super, super key.
I think your point there about the fact that shared mobility is still even at the space is like 5% versus 50% in cars, and that's in like cities that are pretty well developed. I live in New Zealand, and 80% of commute trips are done by car. So the market is just so massive compared to others. I do think it's a really interesting place to play as well, and about the unit economics of how we can drive down the cost provisioning for shared micromobility or other multimodal services, so that the cost per kilometer can actually get down and be competitive with cars, because I think that's where the big challenge has been. Cool. Well, look, I want to shift a little bit how we're thinking about this as well, because I think we talk about multimodal commuters, and the topic of the talk is future of commuting. I want to understand who these people are. Like, what are we seeing? Giancarlo, I would love to understand a bit more about the services that you're running, and whether or not you are getting people who are commuters and actually using this. And then David, if you've got any, what you're seeing in the kind of commuting data and the people who are on the side in Free Now who might be using your service pretty frequently in that space.
Okay, I just want to say one thing on the subject before, talking about the role of public transportation. If you need, thank you, because I don't know if it's going to lead the evolution of Maas, but the public transportation, they have to play a central role, because they are, like Shirley said, in the everyday use of people traditionally, and they catalyze the big percentage of movement and commuting all over our countries. And particularly because even if they don't realize, they have been always doing that. If you think that to the connection from airports to city center with the special trains or underground, if you think about connection with trains and then ferry boats to go to England or UK, it's an approach they always have in their business. And they just have to understand that it's to be applied also to the micro mobility and urban mobilities. This is the step to go through. I think that the sharing operator can help them in a very important way. And the cooperation, like David said, is very, very important. But they have to play a central role in this evolution in this group, because they have been always doing that. They know how to do. They have the customer bases and everything they need for. And the operation culture has to be given maybe by sharing operators in a partnership environment. That I think is the best way to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we got to too. Yeah. Excellent. And in terms of the multimodal commuters, what are you seeing?
Commuters, I don't want to escape your question anyway. But I think that most of them are still people moving every day for job issues from suburbs to downtown, and we don't have so important statistic about touristic commuting in the last month because of a pandemic period. We are we are living. So we don't have a very important use of sharing mobility by tourists. But I think people working every day, moving from suburbs to downtown, at the moment, in the next few years, will remain the most important example of commuters. But I think that we will have more and more a second category of commuters that will be the pleasure commuters that will go away from ownership of transportation vehicles and use intermodal commuting also for going to the cinema, to have their shopping and something like that. And I will add in the picture, if I can, a third kind of intermodal users that we are not focused on that in this moment. We always talk about personal mobility, but I think another important players will be good transportation. From a big factory, from big warehouse to the last shop delivery to private users. And this is already and will become more and more a very, very important source of business for micromobility and for commuters, for professional commuting. I would name like that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Giancarlo. David.
Yeah, obviously, like the pandemic, that doesn't help like to identify real trends at the moment, because the restrictions obviously impact the way people are commuting. So I can only say, like, yeah, the type of users we see on the platform, obviously daily commuters. We see that on what the biggest metric, like to see that is like most of the rides we're having on the platform take place from Monday to Friday at the moment. So we can see like leisure is still like very, very weak because like the traffic over the weekend is still quite weak. So tourists, like we don't see a lot at the moment. Obviously, it's so complicated, like to move from one country or one city to the other. That's not the type of traffic we see a lot at the moment. What is starting like to rise a little bit is related to B2B travel as well. Like it was heavily impacted by the pandemic, but like B2B is another category I would like to highlight there. So daily commuters, B2B travelers, tourists, these are the main categories we see, like and potential users of the Maas platforms, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to something that Richard mentioned in his in some of your earlier comments, Rich, which is around this idea that like cities are themselves very essential and strategic partners in what the future of commuting is going to look like, and the future of those mobility as a service platforms is going to look like. Because I think one of the things that we've really seen has been, a lot of cities around the world, especially during COVID, have said, we are going to go and do a bunch of infrastructure redevelopment and say, we're going to put up temporary bike lanes, and that's going to be what the cities are going to like. They're going to flip them pretty quickly and then put in that, which I think has been probably for an urbanist like myself, kind of a dream outcome in some ways, because this happened a lot faster than I think a lot of people have realized. But I kind of want to dig in there and just say, our cities are still in many ways designed for the paradigm of personal car ownership. They're still there. And so what infrastructure do you see needed to be able to really unleash multimodal transportation yourself? And then I'll go to Shirley as well.
It's a great question, and the conversation we have with cities every single day. And I think, if we look at the enablers to really creating that really huge shift in modality from cars to from my perspective, to scooters as an example. Bearing in mind that 50% of all journeys in the UK are less than 5 miles, and these are journeys that can be taken by micromobility, either scooters or bikes. And so, but at the moment, we're only seeing around 20% of our users saying that they, were taking were on car trips. So there's a huge gap there. There's 80% of people still come from other forms, and so how do we get people more from cars? So I think it's around, and the Royal Cities can play, of course, to make that happen. I think it's around making the rider feel safe, and particularly when we find with certain groups of riders, female riders that we've reached out to, have said, why would you not use micromobility more, or how would you use micromobility more? Some of the feedback is, we want to make sure that we ride in areas that are well lit, and we also want to ride in areas that are segregated from cars, because no one wants to ride next to a 2-ton vehicle, centimeters away from you. So I think a huge enabler and something that cities can do to help achieve this shift is creating those cycle lanes, creating those segregated lanes so that people feel safe while riding. And then the other area, particularly with free floating micromobility like Voi scooters, is finding space where scooters can live. So at the moment, the majority of our vehicles are on the pavement in cities, and that obviously causes a clash with certain pedestrians, visually impaired groups, etc. But that's us trying to fight to find space in the city. What we need to do is find a more sustainable option, and we need to start taking space away from cars. If you imagine one car parking space is around 10 to 15 scooters, each one doing about 10 journeys a day, that's super more efficient use of space than one car doing 1 or 2 trips.
Careful, Rich. I mean, you're talking heresy now, man.
Exactly. But of course, cities are kind of taught, they're stuck in the middle. They want to make that move, but they're still under immense pressure to provide more space for cars, because there is still, a need for cars, and we're at that tipping point where people want to use micromobility, but it's not that convenient. It's not as convenient as it could be, and so we need cities to play their role by giving us space that produces access and availability to the service, so that it's a no-brainer for someone to say, well, do I jump in a taxi, or sorry, David, do I jump in a taxi, or do I jump on a scooter or a bike? It's about availability. We need to be close to that customer need, that moment of need. And we don't want users to walk too far to have to, you don't want to walk 10 minutes to get a scooter to ride 10 minutes. You need it at your point of need. So cities, helping with infrastructure, providing that parking space, providing those segregated cycle lanes, producing areas that are well lit and feel safe. And also from an enforcement perspective, I think there's also a role to play there. We do see cities putting the enforcement on the operators, and of course we play our role there. We have a 3-strike policy. If you're non-compliant 3 times, you're removed from the service. So there's a lot the operator can do to raise the bar there, but I think also enforcement from their perspective to make sure that people are also riding in their cities safely. I think there's a collaborative 2-way effort there, so something worth considering as well, which is not so much infrastructure, but more kind of how we kind of cope with this increased micromobility.
Absolutely.
So,
Julie,
if I jump in terms of
go for it.
I'll give you the multimodal approach, okay? Because GoTo is multimodal with the shared cars, mopeds, bikes, and kick scooters. I think Tel Aviv is a great city, okay? For example, because what we have in Tel Aviv is for the free floating cars, there's dedicated parking spots. Okay, so the big problem with car sharing, for example, is finding the parking spot, even with the moped and the kick scooters. So there's dedicated parking spots. So there's always a place to park. If there's not here, there is here. Plus you can park anywhere in the city. I think cities need to push to give dedicated parking spots for the cars, for the mopeds, for the kick scooters, and so on. Another great city is Vancouver. Vancouver also gives for car sharing, dedicated parking spots. And Madrid, for example, lets any EV cars park for free in the city. So I think those are different initiatives that are very good to promote this type of services. Now, if we go for micromobility, again, I think Tel Aviv is really advanced in that because of all the assets that were really interrupting the streets, they decided to put an order, and they decided to mark on the floor different areas where actually all the micromobility players can park. So as Rich was saying, it was not taken away from pavements, except in areas where you have big pavements. Actually, it was taken away from the cars. So of course you have some citizens that are complaining about space given to shared cars and shared micromobility assets. But overall, at the end of the day, a shared car actually removes between 11 and 19 cars from the street, right? So why have a car that just sleeps there for 2 weeks and you only use it once every 2 weeks to go somewhere? So I think really cities, they need to provide first of all, more of these bike lanes and all of that. They need to provide that the shared lanes, the shared lanes for the buses and stuff, that they will be also for shared cars, and they need to provide these parking spots that are dedicated for shared vehicles. And one last thing also that, for example, Madrid is doing is that it's removing fuel-based cars from the city center. Unless you're a citizen, a resident of that area and you have a parking, you cannot enter with fuel-based cars. And I know London is putting a tax for cars to enter London. So these cities really, really need to do is push away the private car ownership, because it really does not make sense to have a car unless you're in the US. That's the only place where I had a car. Everywhere else I lived in 7 different countries, I use my walking and bike and metro and taxi and shared cars, shared mopeds, and so on. So that's my opinion.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Something on this topic? Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Go for it. Yes.
On the topic of the infrastructure, I think it goes hand in hand as well with another topic which is relevant to the city, which is data sharing. Like if the cities understand better how people are moving in the cities, they're more willing to adapt their infrastructure. So that's also something that the mass operators definitely need to work on and work together with the cities to understand how people are commuting actually, and then they are more willing to adapt the current infrastructure, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Giancarlo, we lost you for a second there, but I would love to hear your I'd love to hear your thoughts before we finish up. And so, folks, we've got about 3 minutes or so before we start going to the questions. So if you would like to, please drop some questions into the Q&A, and I'll ask them of the panelists. If you have a particular panelist that you'd like to ask that question of, be sure to put that in there as well. Either put that in the Q&A or in the chat. But Giancarlo, the question that we had was around what infrastructure is needed to unleash multimodal transport, and I know obviously VAIMOO has got a you provide the bikes, but you also do the docking stations, docking stations, but the infrastructure as well around that. So maybe just talk to that a little bit, and so what you're seeing in that space, and cities' willingness to be able to invest in that sort of infrastructure. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
You got me now. I think in the short term, we have to focus the safety question, the recharging and parking problem, and the proximity problem. I saw some experience in Europe that the increase of safe and close parking to the station, for example, increase the utilization of shared mobility and public transportation at the same time. So in a very short period, we have to increase and to work on the operational structure to help all the operators to increase the utilization of this kind of mobility. But in a long-term vision, I think that the challenge is much more harder for cities, because I think we have to rethink and rebuild the city structures, more or less like it did Haussmann in Paris in the 19th centuries, because we are not being planned for sharing mobility, micromobility, Maas. And so we can work for improve the present situation, but I think we have to rethink everything and focus on and put in the center of the picture IoT opportunities and micromobilities for sustainability, environment, and efficiency, and everything like that. I think it's a long-term work that involves a lot of competencies, a lot of capabilities, but is a very different scenario. I think we will let as a heritage for 21st century commuters and movers.
Fantastic. All right, so we've got a couple of questions here. We've got about 20 minutes or so, so what I'll do is I'm going to start off, because I like this question. It's quite fun. I would be interested. This is from Stefan. I would be interested in who of the panelists is a commuter themselves and how many different vehicles they use on their commute. So maybe we'll go Shirley, David, Giancarlo, Rich.
Sure. I think probably all of us are commuters. Well, maybe not in COVID, but now it's safe here, so we are commuters. My main form of commuting is actually bike. I love the bike. It's a way to do sport and breathe fresh air, and walking actually. And then I use a lot the shared cars. especially on the weekends to go to see my grandmother or family or go on a weekend trip. So this goes back to, you know, the usage. So during the week, there's a lot of commuting usage and B2B. And then during the weekend, when you book a round trip car and you take it to go away and come back and it's scheduled, it's like your own car. That's where we actually have more usage with the round trip. So I'm like a heavy bike and round trip car sharing user.
Fantastic, thank you. David.
Yeah, so I live in Barcelona, actually. I don't own a car, so I use like pretty much like all the other mobility types. Like I use like e-mopeds, super popular in Barcelona. I use e-bikes as well. I own a bike myself, and I also like surely like use car sharing over the weekend, mostly like to go somewhere else.
Excellent. Giancarlo?
I personally live in a sunny city on the seaside in the south of Italy. So I try to never use the car. I prefer e-bike and e-moped. Of course, I have to put e-bike first, as we are the producer of e-bike. So we are anyway working here. But, I has always a past of a moped producer. So after the e-bike that I find the easier, the more inclusive vehicles, I use also e-moped. And as Shirley said, in the weekend time, I prefer walking actually. And so I try not using car even in a sharing mobility, because I think that is for my needs, it's too big to over-dimensioned. So I try to stay on the two-wheelers.
Excellent, excellent. And you, Rich?
So I live in London, and I would love to use e-scooters here, but they're not technically legal yet. So I can't use scooters, but I was in Cambridge actually over the weekend, and I used exclusively e-bikes and e-scooters, Voi's e-bikes and e-scooters, obviously e-bikes with from Giancarlo and his team. But I do have an electric car. So I have a Nissan Leaf because I have a toddler, I have a 3-year-old, and it's very difficult to get around and do the shopping runs and take him to nursery without it. So I have a green energy supplier called Bulb. So all my power is from renewable energy to my house. And then we have an electric car that we charge using that renewable energy to do the trips around here. But I would say that beyond that, I mean, we really need in London better bike and scooter services, particularly in the suburbs. I think a lot of the plans are very much focused on what do we do in the centre, but people very much forget the suburbs, and there's that disconnect. Well, how do people get in? It's okay once you're in, because there's lots and lots of services available, Santander Cycles in London, etc., Lime Bike, but outside of the centre there's absolutely nothing. So there's huge amounts of work that needs to be done by all of us on this call to help kind of bridge that gap for those in the suburbs to get into the cities.
Excellent. And I'm going to answer that question because I just like answering that question, which is I take the train in and I use car shares when I need a car, and I have an electric scooter from Boosted, which is my best vehicle I've ever owned. Marvelous. Okay, there's a great question here from KS, which is who owns the customer relationship and data in a collaboration model? And I'm not going to go to all of you, but if there's anybody who feels particularly called to answer that question, please put up your hand and I can. No, okay, David, I'm going to go with you because you're. Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
I can go for it. So I mean, like free now, like we work with L2 integrations. So that means like the entire experience from the customers is taking place on our platform, and like we own the customer relationship. So these are Freenode customers that are using Voi scooters in Germany, for instance, or tier scooters in Germany or in France. And there's very specific cases where we need to share the data, but like that's not the main rule. Let's say like if we talk about miles, for instance, car sharing, like when there's a fine going on or something like that, like you need to share the customer data like with the operator. But like as a general case, like we own the relationship with the customer.
Yeah, I think
just to add to that. I mean, although most of the operators will own their data, I think it's super important to anonymize the data and share the so what of the data with the cities, because that's our role to educate them, because they don't know what we know, and we can help them with infrastructure, service design, city planning, etc. And so we have a role to play in that. And so it's sanitized, anonymized data, but to show, here's the heat mapping, here's where people, here are the roads that have the biggest usage of micromobility. This is where you need to put more micromobility provisions, or conversely, these areas where no one uses micromobility, maybe you need, better infrastructure there. Or this is where we see people opening the phone, but not starting a ride. Maybe we need to put some more parking areas there for micromobility, so that people have, the service to take them on their journey home. So there's a lot of data that we can use and share, but obviously the operator owns the data. But the so what, the sharing of that data is super important as well.
Yeah. Just to jump in quickly at GoTo, because we do everything in-house and everything is GoTo brand, GoTo wallet, GoTo everything. So we own the data of the users, because once they join the GoTo supermarket of mobility, they can use any of the services. And actually we use this data also, to sell them different types of services, but everything within the GoTo world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's an anonymous question here, which is, what are the technical requirements for integrating public or private micromobility operators into platforms, e.g. API? How does this differ between privately owned mobile platforms and public transit systems, e.g. transit passes? And I wonder, David, you probably have the most experience in this, and then Rich, if you've got any, I don't know if you've done any, or actually for that matter, Shirley, if you've done any integrations with public transit operators themselves, and if there was anything that you could shed light on there.
I can give it a start and then people can complete it. Obviously, I'm not a product and tech person. I'm a business person. So my apologies in advance, for not being able to provide all the technical details. But this question is pointing out one of the main challenges we are facing with public transports. The fact that there's no standard at the moment, each city, each public transport organization or association has its own standard, and that's what makes it so complex to integrate. So if you look at the private operators, they're working basically on the same logic and same types of APIs, so they're pretty straightforward to integrate. But if you want to integrate RATP in Paris or Renfe in Spain or Deutsche Bahn in Germany, and all the related services, this is becoming much more complex, and that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing. Regulatory around public transport, and the technical solution in the background is what is making it so complex to integrate public transport so far. Yeah.
I can jump in there really quickly, which is I did an amazing interview with the founders of Mobility Data, who have developed the MDS standard, which is the default standard a lot of cities will use for the scooter operators. And I think that their plan is to be able to go on and add things like car share. And their idea is that they're funded by Rocky Mountain Institute. They're a nonprofit. They're just there to develop a standardization of data that can be shared across all cities, and that we would get similar to the GBFS, actually, GTFS, the Generalized Transit Feed Specification, which is how and Google Maps knows and Apple Maps knows where every train is, and where, how they can pull that data of knowing that, hey, I want to get from here to here. You can be like, oh, there's a train that's going to be there in 6 minutes. So there will be similar things developed in this space as well. But yeah, it is a nascent space, and hasn't, I don't think there's been a forcing function yet that has kind of pushed all of that in one direction to one standard yet. So
just maybe
if there's anything else.
Yeah, just especially on the public transport ticketing part, we have to keep in mind that a lot of systems are still paper-based at the moment. They're not even digital. So that's even a bigger challenge, to integrate these type of solutions, obviously. But that's hopefully what will be solved in the coming months and years to give a complete solution there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's one great question here, which is from Neil Webster. I understand the focus on micromobility sharing and revenue, but in a more holistic sense, which European cities do the panel feel will be trendsetters for car reduction? And I'd love to just hear all four of you, on if you had to pick one city, which one do you think will be the lead on car reduction?
Paris.
Yeah, if we start with Rich, Giancarlo, David, and then Shirley.
I'd have to say Paris. Certainly from a big city perspective, we've seen Paris lead the way on a number of different initiatives. I mean, with Velib many years ago, with the bike sharing, they were the first major city to go there. E-scooters, they were the first major city to really embrace e-scooters in August 2018. And now, you know, their mayor is talking around the 15-minute city and the need to start to design and build cities where you're no more than 15 minutes away from everything you need, from work, school, food, entertainment, etc. And micromobility plays a role in that. I do think that they're not shy, they're not waiting for others to you know, make mistakes and then join later. They're a first mover and they're incredibly innovative from a big city standpoint. So I would say, you know, from my perspective, Paris is really one to watch.
Excellent. Giancarlo. Oh, you're on mute.
All right. Okay. I think that if I understood well the question, that the car reduction is something we are going to have more and more, given to many factors. On one side, I think it's an economic problem, so that will affect the ownership of the cars. I think
totally.
It's
but if you were to pick one city, which city do you think is leading on car reduction in Europe?
Okay. I don't have a so wide experience like my partner here. In my experience, what I saw personally, I would say Paris, even if it's not a perfect way. In Italy, we're experiencing a very important car reduction in Milan, where we have so many sharing mobility operators, a very efficient public transport system. And I think that it is also related to the city structure. I think, for instance, that in such cities very important like Rome, at the moment it's very hard, still very hard to have a really car reduction effect because of distances, because of public transportation level, because of geographic structure of the cities, many hills, many up and downs. So in my experience, what I see, with my eyes, Paris and Milan are good examples for car reduction in Europe. Almost.
Excellent. Thank you, Giancarlo. David?
Yeah, I'm not going to be very original, but yeah, Paris is really ahead in terms of big cities. I believe like the way they adapt the infrastructure and the way they promote like micromobility and the tenders they're running there. I think it really goes in the right direction. And like on the chats, like you could see like people suggesting smaller cities, and I agree. Like in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in the Nordics, like there are some nice initiatives as well, but smaller cities, like it's not the same like to do it on a city of 100,000 people in a city where 12 million people are commuting every day. You know, that's so I would pick up Paris.
Yep.
So I would say on one hand, Paris also, I actually lived there 4 years, and in addition to everything that was said, they are building, or they were supposed to release like a téléphérique or something that takes from Porte d'Italie to the center, or from La Défense, or even like, you know, they're looking for like shared metros in the air. Okay, so it's very innovative. But also another city that I think is interesting is Copenhagen. And I was just opening the internet when we were talking. So 49% of people bike there, 27% car, okay? Only 27%, that's really low, 6% walk and 18% public transportation. So, and I know that they're very innovative with, you know, the bike schemes and with the electric car sharing schemes. So Copenhagen, I think, is also a very, very good city.
Excellent. Oh, nice. The Danes will like that. All right. So we have minutes left. There's a question here, which is what are the strategies to keep the corona pandemic increase of alternative commuting going from so how do we stop it going back to normal? And then alternatively, and is there a way that we can use this to be able to switch from cars completely? Like, do you support something really new? And do you see anything that's coming down the pipe from anybody around Europe? And that's a paraphrase question from Daniel.
So if I can start.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go back around the other way. Yes.
So, so in terms of COVID, I think a lot of people actually, started working from home, and that shift, I think a lot of people are starting to go back to work, at least here in Israel, because of vaccines and stuff. But still, some people would like to remain working from home. And when you're working from home, and this whole last year, there's no point of keeping 2 cars at home because you don't need them. So a lot of people are selling their secondhand cars. So I think COVID, in terms of everything that it did for the environment, it did amazing things. It reduced the pollution in the streets and the number of cars and the pollution from airplanes, and moved us all to Zoom, so we don't need to all fly to, I don't know, London and have this conversation somewhere. So so I think car reduction, COVID in many ways did lead to car reduction, and to the fact that you don't need your second car, and you only can need a car or a moped or a bike whenever you need it. You will book it, but you have alternative ways, and you actually save a lot on your share of wallet because it's a big expense.
Absolutely. Anybody else got anything they wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I guess a quick one from me. I think COVID has really pushed cities to kind of redraw the map on transport, and certainly the 15-minute city I talked about before. I think people have started to see that happening already, where people have worked from home, as Shirley has mentioned, and they've started to explore their local areas. So businesses in suburban areas were doing better as people started to go there to do their food shopping, or to get their entertainment, or go to the local parks, or explore the local landscape. And that's I think an area that we should be nurturing. So I think the way we operate as and cities can work together is to make sure that we're building our services around this new way of working, this working from home culture that is going to continue for the foreseeable future, and how people are going to embrace their local communities, and how micromobility and other forms of transport can nurture that and build that. And let's not forget that transport underpins prosperity and health and quality of life for people. So there's a lot of work that we can do there to really raise the bar. Fantastic.
Excellent. Well, folks, we've got about 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to give an opportunity to each of you. So I'm conscious people might want to try and track you down after this, or things like that. What we could do is if you just want to drop your the best way to contact you into the chat so that everybody can see it. If it's a Twitter DM or anything like that. And then there's one final question here, which actually I'd love to drop to you, Richard, just because you had talked about, you'd given a figure there, which is that of the e-scooter trips that are happening, only 20% of those are actually coming from cars. And there's a question here from Oliver from Sentience asking, how are mobility players currently monitoring multimodal trips, their share of wallet, and their accurate contribution to sustainable mobility and function of the change in modality by the end user?
So how are we monitoring
how are you monitoring multimodal trips and their share of wallet and their accurate contribution to sustainable mobility? So in other words, how can you tell that effectively, that 20% number? How is there other ways that maybe we can tell that better over time?
It's a good question, and a great question. So we interview and send questionnaires to all of our riders every single month. So we'll have several thousand responses out of our X million users, active users, every single month, telling us which mode of transport would they have taken if they were not taking scooters on that particular trip. So we have very, very clear data to say, what the split is between the different forms of transport. And so what we do find is there are certain levers that we can work with cities to increasing that positive modal shift, I call it. So getting people away from cars rather than negative modal shift, which is getting people away from active forms of transport such as walking and cycling. But what we can say is things like, how do we reduce people going from walking? Well, the average distance in the UK is about 1 kilometre that you will walk until you will look for alternative forms of transport. So our focus is to drive people onto longer journeys and so the likelihood of taking from walking is reduced. In this day and age, we all have such little time to kind of, we don't have the luxury of walking an hour. We have to get there quickly in the most cost-efficient way possible. So is it the car, is it the scooter? That's the way, that's where how people will start to think. People don't have the luxury of, I'm going to walk 2 miles and take half an hour. And that's not where we're at. So we need to make sure that the way we design the services, the way where we put the scooters complements that. But just to answer the question, we get a lot of data from the rider. And that's obviously feeding back into how we can, if we're seeing a shift from taking people from walking, we have to change our service design. So we very quickly adapt on a monthly basis to make sure we're not trending in the wrong direction. But right now we're 20 to 30% of our journeys are from cars. We know that if we will start to increase availability, increase number of scooters in cities, then we will see a bigger shift, because no one's going to ditch the car at home if they can't guarantee they're going to get back in the evening. So totally. You need that guarantee to get to and from, and don't forget, in the UK this is a trial, so we're very much scaling a lot more conservatively than any other market we've operated in. So I think we're seeing a slower modal shift change, but I think this summer we should see. I mean, we're at around 7,000 scooters in the UK currently. Will be around 20 to 30,000 by the summer. So I think once we get to that scale, 3x where we're at, we're going to see hopefully a proportional greater shift in modality, and that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Excellent. Hey folks, well, thank you so much for joining. And we're just running out of time, but I wanted to say thank you so much to Rich, Giancarlo, David, and Shirley so much for joining and engaging in this conversation, and also to our attendees for their fantastic questions. Sorry I didn't get anywhere near through all of them, but yeah, if you would like to check it out, there's some links in there as well for various people on how to get in touch with everybody in there, and with that I will leave it up, but wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye. Bye.